My name is Donna, and this is how it all started. I grew up in a small town, moving from one foster home to another until I finally found stability with Walter. For the first time, I had something I had always craved, a sense of permanence. Life remained quiet and predictable until I set off for college, the first in my foster family to leave for the big city and pursue higher education. I majored in Chinese, poured everything I had into my studies, and eventually landed a job as a translator at an international trading firm. To someone like me, from a humble background, it felt like a major triumph. One Tuesday, like any other, I stepped into a cozy cafe near my office for my usual black coffee when I noticed him. David. He stood out, tall, with a smile that could disarm anyone. Our eyes met, and without thinking, I said, "I don't think I've seen you here before." Trying to escape the madness of the office, he replied, grinning, before introducing himself. Our conversation flowed easily, and before I knew it, casual coffee dates turned into something more. Weeks turned to months, and by the end of the year, we were discussing our future. David, a city native, was everything I wasn't: polished, confident, and well acquainted with the fast-paced life I was just beginning to navigate. After a year of dating, we decided to get married. I was overjoyed, but I wanted him to meet my foster parents, Walter, who had given me a life filled with love, even if it was in a small, modest apartment. I remember warning David, "It's not much, but it's full of love." He nodded, though I could sense his discomfort. That weekend, my parents welcomed him with warmth, but David seemed restless. He kept checking his watch, looking like he was itching to return to the city. The drive back was quiet until I finally broke the silence. "You've been really quiet, David. What's going on?" He hesitated, then said, "Your parents are nice, but our lives are so different, it's hard to relate." His words stung, but I tried to stay composed. "And what does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It's just different. It's not what I'm used to, but it doesn't change how I feel about you," he clarified. I stared out the window, deep in thought. My simple upbringing and his sophisticated lifestyle seemed worlds apart. "David, it's not about luxury, but respect for where we come from," I replied. He agreed, but I couldn't shake the feeling of something missing between us. That night, I lay awake, torn between the simplicity of my past and the complexities of my future. Soon after, it was time for me to meet David's family. His mother, Rachel, lived in a swanky high-rise, her apartment a dazzling display of wealth and elegance. Stepping into her world, I couldn't help but wonder how I would fit in. When we arrived, Rachel greeted us at the door, immaculately dressed in designer clothes. Her home was a showcase of luxury. "So, Donna, what is it you do?" she asked, her gaze sharp, as though evaluating me like a business transaction. "I'm a translator at an international trading firm," I replied, my voice steady despite the scrutinizing stare. "Impressive," she said, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The conversation turned to my background, and her expression shifted, slightly disapproving. "From the provinces and fostered, you say? Not exactly the kind of family I had in mind for my son," she remarked, her tone cool. David quickly intervened. "Mom, please, Donna's wonderful, and I love her. We're getting married." Rachel's demeanor shifted again, her curiosity piqued. "Married? When is this happening? How will you plan it?" she pressed. "We're thinking of a small, intimate ceremony in Florida," I explained, hoping she'd understand our desire for simplicity, but Rachel's reaction was one of disbelief. "Florida? Just the two of you? No, that won't do. What will my friends think if I can't throw a proper wedding for my only son?" I kept my composure. "It's our day, Rachel. We want it to be authentic, without the fuss." She was visibly upset. "This discussion is over," she declared, storming out of the room. David shot me an apologetic look. "Let me talk to her," he said quietly. "We'll figure it out." 5 months later, there we were in Florida. It was meant to be just David and me, but Rachel showed up uninvited, camera in hand, ready to capture every moment. Her presence hovered over us, ensuring her social media feeds would be filled with photos of her son's wedding. David seemed unfazed, basking in the sun and the ceremony, but I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. "I thought it was supposed to be just us," I whispered to him. "I know, I'm sorry, she's just excited, let's try to enjoy it," he replied. Rachel, of course, was everywhere, snapping pictures and commenting on every detail. Smile here. This will look amazing on my feed. I felt like a mere accessory in her carefully curated spectacle rather than the bride I had envisioned. What was supposed to be a private moment had turned into one of her lavish displays. When we returned home as newlyweds, I expected our time together to be filled with quiet intimacy, lazy mornings in bed, spontaneous dances in the living room. At first, it was everything I had hoped for. David gave me a stunning ring, a family heirloom that sparkled in the sunlight. Be careful with that ring, it's an heirloom. Rachel's voice cut through, as she appeared suddenly, her disapproving gaze falling on the precious object. The first weeks of marriage were blissful, but then Rachel started showing up unannounced, disrupting our peace. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Rachel, as though inspecting our home like a military base. Just checking in on my favorite newlyweds, she said with a forced smile. As she wandered through our home, it felt like she was looking for imperfections. I tried to remain polite, engaging in light conversation as she eyed the kitchen, her fingers grazing every surface. Donna, do you ever clean this place? And where are the fresh vegetables? A man needs his greens, she remarked. Later that evening, I vented to David, but he shrugged it off. She means well, just go with it, he said. Go with it? I repeated, frustration rising. She's treating me like a failure in my own home. David kissed my forehead, as if that could make everything better. She's lonely, Donna, let's cut her some slack. But the slack started feeling endless. One day, after signing a major contract at work, I came home to find Rachel sitting in our living room, her gaze sharp and accusatory. I heard you've been working late again. Is something going on? She asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. It's just a big project, I explained, trying to keep things light, but her disapproval was impossible to ignore. 3 days later, she showed up at my office, counting the men around me and insinuating something inappropriate. Then, she barged into my boss's office, eyeing him with a critical look. I was mortified. Later, I demanded David handle it. Your mom crossed a line today, David. She accused me of cheating. This needs to stop. He sighed, his exhaustion apparent. Please, just try to get along with her, for me. But, getting along, started feeling more like enduring the unbearable. Rachel's influence over David began to show, as he started criticizing things about me, my clothing, my hours at work, things he never minded before. One morning, as I prepared for work, he frowned at my outfit. Why are you wearing that? It's too much. You're just asking for attention. I stood still, confused. It's professional, David, what's wrong with it? I asked. Nothing, he said, his tone distant. Just, don't make things harder than they need to be.